Okay, we are live on YouTube.
All right, welcome everybody. And it is Friday, March 14th, and this is the House Energy and Digital Infrastructure Committee. We are here with Legislative Council to continue our walkthrough of H 289. So I'm Representative Kathleen James from Manchester.
Scott Campbell from St. Johnsbury, Calgary, Essex.
Michael South.
Caledonia too.
Christopher Howland, Rutland 4.
Dara Torrey, Washington 2.
Graham Kleffner, Chittenden 13, Burlington.
All righty, and our guests.
Thomas Weiss, Montpelier.
Thank you.
Peter Sterling, Renewable Energy Vermont.
Allison Westpaffy, Danville, Vermont.
All righty,
Jack Locker, Committee Assistant.
super. And for the record,
Ellen Tchaikovsky, Office of Legislative Counsel. So yesterday you started the walkthrough of H 289 as introduced. You got to page 13. That is where we can pick up.
great. Are you able to pull the bill up on the screen, or should we just follow along ourselves?
She doesn't have them.
Yeah, I'm not going to, but it,
Okay, we will do it on our own. Page 13.
so the only change in tier 4 is the name change to the Clean Energy Standard. Subdivision 6 of the current renewable energy standard lays out the alternative compliance rates for the tiers. And so it's adding to the tier 1 alternative compliance payment the reference to clean and renewable energy. And then it's also moving the tier 2 requirement for distributed renewable generation, which is currently at 6 cents per kilowatt hour. It's moving it to the top of page 14, which is the 4 cents per kilowatt hour with calculations to adjust for inflation.
Sorry, could you,
Sure. So on the top of page 14,
is it for the tier 3, you said?
tier 2.
Tier 2.
So yeah, so on the top of page 14 for distributed renewable, that's tier 2.
And energy transformation is tier 3.
Yes. And that being changed.
Okay.
But it's adding tier 2 to the tier 4 and tier 5 language so that it shall be 4% per kilowatt hour annually, commencing on January 1, 2025 with calculations for inflation. Section 5. This is amending 30 VSA 8006. This is the statute that directs the PUC to adopt the REC system. So the changes start on line 8. So the commission shall amend and expand its system of tradable renewable energy credits for renewable resources that may be earned by electric generation, qualifying for the prior RES to include clean energy generation. The system shall recognize tradable renewable energy credits monitored and traded on the New England Generation Information System, shall provide a process for the recognition, approval, and monitoring of environmental attributes attached to clean and renewable energy that are eligible to satisfy the requirements of 8004 and 8005, which is the RES, but are not monitored and traded on the GIS, and shall otherwise be consistent with regional practices. So, yesterday, Rep. Kleffner asked if RECs and ZECs are going to be reported together or separately, and based on this language, I still don't know. I just drafted the language that was given to me. I didn't actually field the description of what the intent is, and based on this, I'm still not sure. So I think you should hear from the administration on how they envision that working.
Right, thank you.
Yeah. And then, oh no, sorry.
But they can't get both, or they can't? Can they get a ZEC and a REC for the same megawatt hour?
I don't know.
So that's still a question.
Yeah, that's what I was just saying.
Okay.
No, I don't know. Yeah, because it's just adding, it's telling them to amend and expand their current system of RECs, but then they're also there's no explicit reference here to a ZEC, but there's a definition created for ZEC. So I'm not entirely sure. Yeah. And then at the top of page 15, clean is added. So further, the commission shall ensure the providers disclose the type of generation used and shall clearly distinguish between energy or tradable energy credits provided from clean, renewable, and non-renewable energy sources, and existing and new renewable source energy. Section 6. This is amending 8008. As used in this section, the revenues mean revenues that are from the sale through tradable clean or renewable energy certificates or other means of environmental attributes associated with the generation of clean and renewable energy from the system of generation resources with a total plant capacity greater than 200 megawatts and that are received by a Vermont retail electricity provider on or after May 12th, pursuant to an agreement, contract, memorandum of understanding, or other transaction in which a person or entity agrees to transfer such revenues or rights associated with such attributes to the provider. Just adding the references again to clean or renewable in this paragraph. All right. And I also maybe you should hear more about this because I've been wondering if it should be 0 emission credit there instead of clean. Anyway, section 7 is entirely different topic. So this is the creation of the Renewable Energy for Communities program. So this is what the Department of Public Service in their Act 179 report is proposing as a community solar program. As a sort of successor to what was the end of virtual group net metering last year. So,
Quick question.
Mhm.
Sure. So is that exactly the language from H35?
I don't think it's exact. I think it's very close. But I wrote, this bill was what the administration sent me. And I modeled yours after what was in the report. And so I assume that they're very close and I didn't line them up.
But both are proposed successor programs to the group net metering.
And I do think they're probably close.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. So, all right. So this would be adding a new section to the renewable energy chapter 8005B. So establishment. We're at the bottom of page 15. The Renewable Energy for Communities program is established to achieve the goals of 8005A2. So that's tier 2 of the current renewable energy standard. The commission shall develop the Renewable Energy for Communities program. Onto page 16. That meets the eligibility requirements of this section, which may be implemented by rule, order, or contract. The retail electricity provider shall issue periodic solicitations subject to the requirements of the Renewable Energy for Communities program. So I do just want to flag first, it does say that they can adopt this program either by rule, order, or contract. I don't think I've talked about the difference between rule or order here. When an agency conducts rulemaking, there's a formal statutory process that they have to follow the requirements of in VSA Chapter 25, which is also called the Administrative Procedure Act. There's a set number of public hearings that need to be held when they do a rulemaking, and it takes approximately 8 to 12 months to accomplish a rulemaking, and any changes thereafter to a rule also have to go through that formal process. However, the PUC, unlike a lot of other agencies, has this authority to issue orders, and orders also carry the force of the law, but can be issued in a fully informal process and just are documents issued by the PUC. They're usually for sort of like procedural things or kind of updates that they can issue quickly. In the past, committees sort of, this is a type of document that is sort of a little bit specific to the PUC, but when you're creating a new program, it is worth considering whether you want them to have sort of flexibility by having order authority to make changes more quickly. Otherwise, rules require a lot more time in order for there to be any changes made. And I'm not entirely sure how implementing it by contract would fully work. You might want
Usually it would be by a contract between a commission and a generator.
Well, maybe.
I mean, not by the language, it sounds like.
Well, I know, but the rest of the section goes on to, I believe this is a utility specific directive. So I just mean, we'll see how the rest of the language works, but so yes.
So it's-
Yes,
that's a
but.
question. That's a question, okay.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Uh-huh.
Can you just refresh my memory, the difference between rule and order in terms of public participation?
There are no public participation requirements for order development. And with rules, there's at least one public hearing required to be held by the agency during the development of the rule. And then the rule is presented to LCAR, which is another public hearing. And there's also a required public comment period during which they have to respond to any comments as part of rulemaking. And none of that is part of the order process.
Is there any,
When the PUC, sorry, and I'll also just say, when the PUC issues an order, it is usually part of an ongoing process they have. And so the PUC has its own ePUC system where they do take public comments on the issues they're working on. They do hold hearings usually on issues they're working on, but they're not formally required as part of an order development.
I imagine we're going to see this further as we're going through, but I'm very curious about whether or not we have envisioned in this community solar program any tailoring for the different types of utilities, or if it is a standard program for all.
That will be fleshed out a little bit more. I do think this is very specific to each utility.
Okay.
I think if I am recalling correctly, it's actually pretty light on details because it really is more about the utilities getting their own contracts for these types of systems. But I will continue to read on.
And just one more question before you keep going, which is, have we seen a program like this proposed before? Like, is this one of those things that keeps
No.
coming back? Okay, great, thanks.
Not that I have drafted recently.
Define recently.
Well, when standard offer was ending, there were some, or before standard offer ended, and then there were some contemplations, but this is not that.
Okay, great, thanks.
All right, so on page 16, I'm actually going to start on line 2. So retail electricity providers, so the utilities, shall issue periodic solicitations subject to the requirements of the Renewable Energy for Communities programs. Eligible resources.
What is that?
I think it, well, so I'll keep going, but I think it's directing the PUC to set up a framework with requirements and then directing the utilities to actually just issue bids, and that then there would be contracts with the individual utilities for community solar systems within their district.
So this sounds like a place to ask a question.
Yeah, and DPS, so this is based on the DPS Act 179 report, and so there is definitely more information, and I read that report in December, and so I'm trying to remember, but yes, it came out.
And that's one, I don't think we've walked through that report yet.
I don't think so.
So, hey, Jack.
Oh, be good to PJ.
Yeah, we should put on our
Some of us.
testimony list. We should walk the Act 179 report because we received it and I read it a while ago, but we've never taken testimony on it.
Renewable energy for communities is what they're calling it, Jack. I think it's the.
But the Act 179 report we have.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So eligible resources, distributed renewable generation as defined in Tier 2 shall be eligible to participate in this program. And I remember I told you yesterday that's new, small, local. So after 2010, less than 5 megawatts, capable of connecting to the transmission grid. Objectives. It shall be the objective of the program to develop distributed generation at least costs to ratepayers that is directed by, developed in consultation with, or directly benefits communities by one or more of the following. delivering benefits from renewable energy systems to customers who have historically been marginalized or faced inequitable access to the benefits of renewable energy, including environmental justice focused populations as defined in 3 VSA 6.2. Supporting community participation in the development and governance of distributed renewable generation. Supporting the delivery of benefits to tenants of buildings that are designated as affordable housing. Supporting the delivery of benefits to school and municipal owned buildings. And onto page 17, advancing other priority issues as defined during the program development as detailed under subsection F of this section. Capacity requirements.
I don't want to get into semantics, but like number 2, like I don't even understand what this means. But by developing a consultation that directly benefits communities by one or more of the following: supporting community participation in the development. So the goal there is to support participation in a community.
Through net meter.
Like, are we doing community
Yes.
bonding exercises here, or what?
Yes, actually, kind of. So there hasn't been specific testimony on this, but in the Senate, they were taking testimony on community solar generally, and they call it that, even though that is not a term defined in statute, because I think advocates of that type of program do say it is very bond forming, and it is about developing community while generating solar energy.
Interesting.
So yes, I encourage you to hear from other people on this besides me.
Okay.
Wait, Frank,
What line are you on?
you said,
16.
Page.
we talking financial bonds or?
16.
No,
Or,
no.
or,
No, that's
several figurative bonds, social bonds.
Yes.
the way it's written. That's what it
Somewhere in section.
says, but it
It's
was
Okay.
just
bring this back.
I'm sorry. You guys are on page.
16, line 16.
Supporting community participation.
And
It is a little vague.
Right. And we don't need to get hung up on this.
Madam Chair,
Yeah.
Rep. Howland has a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Rep. Howland.
Is this all a replacement for a system that they used to have where people would subscribe into the capacity of a site?
so last year in Act 179, the definition of group net metering was changed to eliminate virtual net metering. Virtual net metering has previously been used as one form of the community solar, and so those types of systems are no longer eligible to be developed. And so technically, yes, sort of.
I followed that.
Yeah.
That's me.
Yes, and part of the report was because you're getting rid of group net metering, what is something that could replace it? Yes. Okay, so capacity requirement. So on page 17, line 3, retail electricity providers shall issue solicitations for distributed renewable generation equivalent to a percentage of their requirement under tier 2 as determined by the commission. So the commission, as part of its rules, will have to say how much each utility will need to have come from this program for their tier 2 requirements. The PUC will determine in their rule how much of the tier 2 requirement for each utility will need to come from this program. This will be a subset of tier 2 requirements.
And in the res, is it broken down like they have to have so much from tier 1, so much from tier 2,
Yep.
tier 2, yeah.
Currently, it's 20% of their load, their annual sales their load has to come from tier 2 by 2030. So it's ramping up right now. I think it's 7% right now, but it'll ramp up to be 20% eventually. So a sliver of that will then need to come from this.
So I noted that you said order.
Or rules, I don't know.
Well,
It's part of it's part of the category of things that the PUC needs to decide as part of however they establish this program.
mhm.
Solicitation requirement. On a schedule to be developed by the PUC, each retail electricity provider with an obligation under tier 2 shall issue solicitations for eligible distributed generation until it has met its capacity requirement. Coordinated solicitations shall be encouraged. Each retail electricity. I don't know what that means. I mean, I think that like utilities will be able to work together on this. I'm not sure how that would play out, honestly. So each retail electricity provider shall review proposed projects in its service territory according to a set of consistent core criteria as approved by the commission and consistent with the objectives set forth in this section. The requirements for the utilities, the retail electricity providers that are already 100% renewable may be limited by the commission to an amount equal to the provider's requirement to meet distributed generation with load growth above the baseline year of 2024.
Which is tier 5.
Yep, and allowed on a less frequent solicitation schedule. And so that makes sense. So the utilities that are already 100% renewable don't have the same tier 2 requirements that the others have. And so it's directing that the PUC can do a similar thing here for those that are already 100% renewable. Program development. On or before January 1, 2027, the Commission shall implement the Renewable Energy for Communities program. In developing the program, the Commission shall, on page 18, determine principles to guide the development of eligible distributed generation and consider whether additional objectives for the program as defined under subsection A of the section are necessary.
Question.
Rep. Sibilia?
Would using the like the just transition principles be appropriate here, like just referencing that, or is this asking for something that's different?
Maybe there is a reference to the environmental justice focus populations as part of the objectives. But
So it probably makes more sense.
maybe because we're talking it sort of in broad terms about how the PUC is going to tell the utilities what their steps are for adopting this program for their individual contracts. Maybe. So the PUC shall determine whether a percentage of each retail electricity provider's capacity requirement should be reserved to serve specific customers who have previously experienced inequitable access to benefits of renewable energy, and determine any minimum requirement for those projects procured under this program for serving those specific customers. Establish a set of consistent review criteria to be used by all retail electricity providers in solicitation for eligible distributed generation, considering issues in addition to cost, as well as community support or engagement while developing the proposal. Potential for local workforce development and other community benefits to be delivered to the host community. Location of the project, including whether it is in a constrained area of the generation or transmission system, or in an area identified as a preferred location in a regional or municipal enhanced energy plan pursuant to 24 VSA 4352, an anticipated generation profile. Identifying reporting requirements and necessary metrics to monitor how benefits and burdens from the program are distributed across ratepayers. Consult with individuals representing a diverse array of perspectives, including at minimum representation from industry, retail electricity providers, environmental advocates, state agencies, regional and local governments, communities identified as environmental justice focused populations under previous A 6002, municipalities experiencing high energy burden as identified by Efficiency Vermont's 2023 Energy Burden Report, renters and multifamily affordable housing representatives. The PUC shall determine a process for exempting or deferring retail electricity provider requirements under this section in the event no proposals below the applicable alternative compliance payment are received in response to an electricity provider solicitation.
Find alternative, I'm sorry,
Yeah, Brett Morrow.
Alternative compliance payment, has that already been defined?
Yeah, it's actually the thing I started with on page 14. So there's it's the 4 cents per kilowatt hours for, well, they're proposing, it's currently 6 cents per kilowatt hour. For distributed generation, they're proposing it be set at 4 cents in this bill, but yes, there's already a set alternative compliance payment for distributed generation under the RES. And so, you know, that's saying if you don't get any bids below what the alternative compliance payment is supposed to be the ceiling for how much these generation projects cost. If you don't get any bids that are below what we consider the ceiling, there should be a way to defer to having to do anything if it's effective.
That 6 cents is set in statute, or it fluctuates based on market conditions, or?
So
I'm sorry, did you guys already go over this?
Well, it's part of the existing RES, so we haven't talked about it in detail in here, but it was updated last year. I honestly can't tell you off the top of my head. I do know there is an inflation. I can get back to you on that.
Okay,
I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but it's starting on page 13 is where it is sort of discussed in this bill.
Okay, thank you.
Let's see. All right. On page 19, line 10, determine a process for evaluating and reporting on the success of the program in achieving the stated goals, and consider other issues as identified throughout the process.
I think we noticed there's no requirement for them to report to the legislature about how they're developing the program.
Right. Well, I mean, developing the program or what the program is.
In the course of fulfilling these requirements, it seems like the legislature might want to hear about how they're fulfilling the requirements and how the program's designed.
Only if they're doing the job.
Yes. Yes. So I just noted that. That's all.
The commission may use its authority under sections 20 and 21 of this title as may be necessary to support engagement and technical analysis necessary to develop the renewable energy for communities program. This is their bill back authority. So I believe it's their bill back authority. When I can get you more information on that at another time, but this is trying to use existing authority they have for other things in case they need technical experts when they're doing this research and developing a program. Funding may be used to support per diem compensation and reimbursement of expenses as permitted under 32 VSA 1010 to conduct engagement with parties who are not otherwise compensated by their employer.
Stakeholders?
Yeah, you do. I read through the directive of engaging with specific stakeholders. So that would have to come out of their budget to fund the per diem.
Okay.
So that's the end of that section. Yeah, I do encourage you to hear from the department. I do think it is a little vague.
So we'll be,
Yeah.
right now we're just sticking to a walkthrough. And then as we find sections of the bill that we want to learn more about, obviously we'll be calling in all the relevant folks who helped to develop this bill to tell us what they were thinking and what the policy choices that went into it. And so I'm not expecting you to provide that info.
All right. So section 8 is at the bottom of page 19. It's a different topic. So thermal sector program funds for calendar years 2025 and 2026, up to $7 million of the revenues collected by the energy efficiency charge established by 30 VSA 209B3B, on page 20, shall be allocated by the Public Utility Commission to the Fuel Efficiency Fund established under 203A. For calendar years 2027, 2028, and 2029, $15 million of the revenue collected by the energy efficiency charge shall be allocated to the fuel efficiency fund. So I'll just say this is moving funds around that are currently for different programs. So the electric efficiency charge is on your electric bill. That funding currently goes almost exclusively to fund electric efficiency projects conducted by the Burlington Electric Department or Efficiency Vermont. There's a separate pot of money that those efficiency utilities use for thermal efficiency projects. Those funds are generally kept separate. This is reallocating electric efficiency dollars for thermal efficiency dollars. So put funding towards more projects for thermal. I do want to just flag, you can't bind a future legislature. So this is I think, an aspirational statement of how the funds will be directed, but the appropriation process happens every year as part of the budget process. So like, you could try to have $15 million appropriated in the future. It may or may not happen as each legislature considers the budget every year.
Rep. Sibilia?
Yeah, so these are, does the legislature appropriate the, these, yeah.
Well, you should actually hear more about that process. Because I'll stop because I don't want to get too far in the hole, but the legislature is involved at least in initial. Yes. Just when something gets collected into a fund, even if it goes into a fund for a specific purpose, it does have to get the legislature has oversight over that anyways. So, but you should hear from the PUC how that works internally.
I have a question as well. Legally, attorney wise, how do you sweep? I mean, 2025 we're in it.
Mhm.
How do you sweep money out of the 2025 budget? What's that process?
I'm actually not sure.
Okay.
And then, in terms of the energy efficiency charge, do you happen to know roughly what that,
No. Like how much it is?
a year, how much it's collects a year?
No.
It's
You did, I can't remember.
Like 15 million.
It's like something like 50, 60, somewhere in that range.
I think it was.
that sounds.
All right. So on page 20, subsection B, of the funds described in subsection A, 900,000 per year shall be allocated to A&R to fund Energy Navigators program delivered through the community action agencies. And $750,000 per year will be allocated to the Department of Children and Families, Office of Economic Opportunity, to support heat pump deployment through the Weatherization Assistance Program. In allocating the remaining balance in the fuel efficiency fund, the Department of Public Service shall prioritize weatherization assistance for customers with low and moderate income, and consider issues such as current and projected funding amounts and maintaining continuity in workforce associated with delivering thermal sector programs. The total amount collected from the energy efficiency charge for calendar years 2027, 2028, 2029 shall be no greater than the amount authorized to be collected in 2026.
That's a cap. Is that like a cap?
Yes. Yeah.
So these are all new allocations. They're not
Yes.
like increased allocations now.
I think so. I'm not familiar with
Which one are you referring to, Laura?
B. Are you talking about B?
Oh, so that's part of the 15 million from above, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember, well, there may have been a pilot program with the navigators already. I don't know if it's an ongoing program. So I don't actually know.
So my recollection is the way the energy efficiency charge is determined is the EEUs submit a budget and PUC reviews and approves the budget and then sets the charge based on that budget. Isn't that how that works?
I don't know.
Oh. So by limiting the charge, they're putting a ceiling on the budget for each use. Okay.
All right. The next section is a different topic entirely, page 21. Section 9, electric vehicle incentives. So this is amending 30 VSA 209E, so part of the thermal energy and process fuel efficiency funding. So down on line 14, again, for calendar years 25, 26, 27, 28, and 29, net revenue is above costs from the carbon credits under the cap and trade program for the RGGI program, which is in section 255 of this title, or $6 million, whichever is lower, shall be deposited into the electric efficiency fund established by this section. So every year there are credits sold under the RGGI system, and that money currently goes into the thermal efficiency project fund. And this would be moving $6 million into the electric efficiency fund for those years.
But the previous section took money out of that fund.
Yes.
Okay. Rep. Sebelia?
Is there a lot of complicated things happening here, which leads me to wonder, is there a report or study that was done and called for all of this? That did work looking at this that you know of?
No. I do think this is the, hey, we got to do the, Global Warming Solutions Act, and we need to reduce our thermal sector emissions. Here's our proposal from the administration.
I'm not going to touch that.
And then section 10 actually is when the electric vehicle, sorry, that should have been one. So this is electric vehicle funding in section 10. So, I think, so for calendar year 2025, 26, 27, 28, 29, the net proceeds above costs for the sale of carbon credits or $6 million, whichever is lower, is deposited into the electric efficiency fund. That matches the language on the prior section, what I was just talking about. And so this is in 30 VSA 255, which is the RGGI statute. And then new language is being added. Any proceeds above the cost from the sale of carbon credits that exceed $6 million shall be allocated to the Agency of Transportation for the incentive program for new plug-in electric vehicles, Mileage Smart, and Replace Your Ride program, as defined in 19 VSA 2902, 2903, and 2904, respectively.
So,
And then on page 23, section 11, adding a new section. The secretary, and this would be the Secretary of Transportation, in the secretary's discretion, may allocate appropriated funds among the programs established in this chapter. And so those are the programs I just mentioned. Plug-in new incentive program for new plug-in electric vehicles, Mileage Smart, and Replace Your Ride. So electric vehicle incentive programs.
Rep. Southworth?
Plug-in electric vehicles. It's not included plug-in hybrids.
I don't work on any of these programs, so I don't know anything about any of them.
It does include that point. That's-
It does, okay, thank you.
I missed a curve here. I'm trying to understand subsection D on page 22. Is this, how is this related to the previous?
So this is the statute. Yeah, so the section 9 is the energy efficiency charge statute,
Right?
and section 10 is the RGGI statute.
Oh, all right. So
Yeah.
it's basically the same language with different places.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Ellen, on the page 23, the allocation of appropriations. Giving the secretary discretion to allocate funds among the different EV incentive programs. Is that an expansion of
That's a little unusual.
the authority? Okay.
Yeah, I think that authority exists. I'm going to speculate slightly here because I'm trying to remember. I think to some extent, some agencies have authority to reallocate funds within their programs, but this language is being added specifically. So presumably the secretary does not currently have that authority for these programs to, because normally what happens is the legislature does appropriate specific pots of funds for each program. And so this is giving discretion to then reallocate.
Okay.
All right. So then section 12 starts on another new topic. This is amendments to the Global Warming Solutions Act. So section 12 is amending 578, and this is the section that establishes the greenhouse gas emission reduction requirements. So the whole section is rewritten. Section A, greenhouse gas reductions. Vermont shall achieve net zero emissions of greenhouse gases from within the geographic boundaries of the state as measured and inventoried pursuant to 5582 of this title on or before January 1, 2035. It then strikes the current requirements for specific amount, reduction amounts that we currently have in statute, and then it adds new language saying Vermont shall continue to implement the policies to achieve the objectives on page 24 of the 2016 Paris Agreement and shall remain at net zero greenhouse gas emissions across all sectors into the future. But it is eliminating the specific reduction amounts and the other deadlines, except by saying achieve net zero emissions by 2035. Net zero greenhouse gas emissions is defined in the next section. So on page 13, line 16, this means the total amount of greenhouse gases released into the atmosphere after accounting for the amount of greenhouse gases that are naturally absorbed or sequestered is at less than or zero across all sectors.
Ellen, can you, I want to make sure I understand some of the implications here. So I understand the implication, I guess, of from gross to net zero. It looks like we're striking out the requirement to include emissions that are caused by energy use in Vermont that are nonetheless outside of our state borders. I think we had earlier changed requirements to goals at the top of the bill. We're moving out the 2030 deadline to 2035 based on the new net emission request. And then the date shifts I want to understand because it looks like it's delinking. I think the GWSA is not based on the 2016 Paris Agreement, right?
Oh, it is.
I thought it was based on an earlier date. There was an earlier date in there somewhere.
There are earlier dates. The agreement was 2016, but it referenced
1990,
1990 and
2005.
2005. Based on your suit.
So I would have to learn more about that. Okay, and then net zero, and then it's interesting to me that it seems to be deleting the connection to comprehensive energy plan.
Yep, and that changes me on the
Some books for you that Michael.
All right, so I'll have to, if we take testimony on
outside
this
the
part,
door?
I have a lot to
Okay,
understand.
yeah, 'cause
Ref Campbell?
And it looks like there's
we'll just read them
no
outside your door.
direct
Fair enough.
There's a definition of what net zero means, but there's no direction about how greenhouse gases that are naturally absorbed or sequestered. How that is to be determined. There's no direction in the bill that I can see.
Well, there is more information, I think, potentially.
Maybe
Well, maybe not specifically, but there is changes made to the plan.
I guess I'm thinking about the guidance about
Yeah.
about how that should be determined.
that's-
Not an equation,
Oh, yeah.
but just parameters. But there isn't guidance here as far as.
Yeah.
Rep. Sibilia?
So I know we changed requirements to suggestions or whatever it was, goals, sorry. So I'm confused about the requirements still being here.
Agreed.
So,
I agree.
so if we change it in the definitions and we leave this as it is, what is the effect?
Lawsuit.
I think should you pass anything, as you work on this, you would want to make sure all the terms are consistent. So making sure throughout this bill and throughout any other statutes that may reference, you just making sure the terms are consistent. I think perhaps the administration was going back and forth on how exactly they wanted to,
So
phrase this.
I'm sorry.
Things could be typos, or they could just need to be clarified. I don't know.
Okay, so this is language that you were just asked to put in. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so then on page 25, section 14 updates the climate council. So there is created the Vermont Climate Council. The council shall be advisory and composed of the following members.
Excuse me. Melody,
Did you have a question?
I do.
Yeah.
What does the addition of those two words change about the current climate council?
I know the answer to that.
Great.
Well, and I'm sure Rep. Kleppner can answer that as well.
And it as well. And you're asking about advisory and those two words?
Yes, we
Yes.
add those two words. What changes?
So, the governor initially vetoed the GWSA, and in his veto letter, which was clear as they usually are, he said, I am concerned that the way this is written, the recommendations from the Climate Council will be mandatory on state government to enact. And there were some legal questions about whether the legislature had the authority to delegate that amount of authority to an unelected body and so forth. However, the GWSA did end up passing as it was written. And therefore, it is the climate action plan developed by the Climate Council, as I think as the statute is currently written, and correct me if I'm wrong, the state either has to enact that or has to enact rules that will achieve the GWSA's emission reduction goals. So it is in essence mandatory, and this would make it advisory instead of mandatory.
So, but along this point, it would make it, so would it remove the requirement to, yes, it would, because there's no more requirement, it's just a suggestion, but if the rules, so enacting rules.
The Climate Council can direct Secretary Moore to enact rules, but they wouldn't be able to.
Correct.
Yeah, so what's being changed in the next section is that the Climate Council is no longer working on the plan. The agency will be producing the plan.
Rep. Southwood?
So has there been any legal determination surrounding whether the climate council would have the authority to enact and make us do this versus the legislature having that authority? I mean,
Yes, they don't have that authority. So the Climate Council can't make the legislature do anything. They also actually can't make the secretary do anything. They can't force the secretary to adopt rules. They can recommend. That's always been the only thing they could do. The secretary has authority to adopt rules based on what the Climate Council recommends,
And if we have requirements and we're not meeting them and she doesn't adopt rules, she gets, yes.
Yes, and, but, I don't believe it was tested in court whether the current system was, the current system was not challenged in court.
Yeah.
The governor had
No, there's
concerns
a
about it, but
Legal determination
Yeah.
prior to
Yeah.
going into litigation, that's all.
yeah, that was part of that now.
If we discuss this, we're gonna have to take a lot of testimony because yeah. Rep. Sibilia?
So I think what I'm hearing you say, Madam Chair, is there's a lot of questions here. We could stop here or we could get through them. I have a lot of, I mean, I could stay here for.
Same, but I think honestly, I think our answers, I think our answers aren't going to and shouldn't come from Ledge Council. Like, I don't want to put, I want Ellen to talk about the statute and the legal implications of what she's been asked to change, but I just want to be really careful that we're not putting Ellen on the spot with policy questions. I think this is a big policy debate.
But yes, the short answer is in the next section. It's changing what the climate council actually does. So you'll see more of that as I continue.
But I do have a legal question.
Sure.
So clarify for me, because it sounds like I misstated or oversimplified. Clarify for me what the climate council has the authority to do right now.
They have the authority to meet and form subcommittees and take testimony on issues that are described in their statute and to issue the plan and updates to the plan. And I think that's it.
But the secretary has discretion over whether to adopt the plan or not.
No. So the climate council issues a plan. That plan is supposed to be what the legislature and or the secretary adopts. So it's supposed to form the basis of the decisions made by either the secretary or the legislature. The secretary is given authority to adopt rules consistent with the plan. So far, they have done that by adopting the LEVZEV rule as was recommended in the plan. They have not done anything else that was recommended in the plan.
Thank you. That sounds right.
I'm just thinking, I will have a lot of questions about this because yeah.
I was gonna say that the GWSA does require the Secretary of Natural Resources to adopt rules to meet the GWSA targets, whether they are rules proposed by the Climate Council or alternative rules that achieve the same thing. That is, as the law is currently written, that is a requirement for the Secretary of the Agency of Natural Resources. And it is also true that in the 4 years since the original climate action plan was published, the agency has adopted exactly one set of rules, which is California Clean Cars 2 and California Clean Cars 2. They've adopted one rule and, but it is some of the Climate Council recommendations can be enacted by rule at ANR. Some need legislation, such as the Affordable Heat Act was legislation that was recommended in the plan, but needed legislative action.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm done.
No, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just gonna say, we have, we're gonna take testimony next week. We're starting at 100,000 feet on this. So we're gonna take pretty extensive testimony next week on the comprehensive energy plan and the climate action plan. So we'll have a chance where it's good to see where we're bogging down because we'll start at baseline level set with those two important documents, because they, clearly playing a key role here. Okay.
So on page 25, line 8. So the Climate Council is made up of the following members. Currently, it is 23 members. This is changing it. So first, Currently, the chair of the council is the Secretary of Administration, but that's being changed to the Secretary of Natural Resources or designee. And then it's replacing the secretary with the state climatologist or designee. It's keeping the Secretary of Agriculture, ACCD, Human Services, Transportation, Public Service, Public Safety, and then it's adding one member to represent municipal governments appointed by the governor. On to page 26. So currently there is already a member to represent the governor, but it's currently appointed by the Speaker of the House. So I'll get to that in a second. And then on the top of page 26, one member to represent the rural communities appointed by the governor. Again, that's already required, but currently is being appointed by the Speaker of the House. And so then the following members under subsection 11, the following members shall be appointed by the General Assembly. It strikes the member with expertise and professional experience in design and implementation of programs to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And then the rural communities and municipal government, that is being moved to the governor. And then keeping a member to represent the distribution utilities, statewide environmental organization, and the fuel sector, and the manufacturers. It then is moving it's getting rid of the member with expertise in climate change science, I got the state climatologist now. So one member with expertise in design and implementation of programs to increase resilience and to respond to natural disasters resulting from climate change, that is going away. And then also keeping member of clean water sector and small business community, the community action partnership, farm and forest sector, and a youth member, and getting rid of the member from a Vermont-based organization with an expertise in energy and data and analysis. And so I just want to flag something. So it's giving the governor specific appointees, and then it's also putting the rest of them. Previously, there were some appointed by the Speaker of the House and some appointed by the Senate. Now it's just putting them into one bucket appointed by the General Assembly. And so I will just say, I've never seen anything written like that, and who in the General Assembly is going to decide? That's a little bit vague. We usually designate like the Speaker or the Committee on Committees in the Senate as like the people who are actually doing the designation, because there's 180 of you. So that's just something you might want to consider.
So
Brooke, should be on?
just trying to make sure I'm keeping track how many members now there would be of the climate council.
Oh, I think it's 19.
It is 19
8 are from
And-
the legislature.
and 10 are from the governor, 10 and 9 from the legislature. And yeah, it was divided pretty evenly when it was 23. I think it was 8 appointed by the administration, 8 by the House, and 7 by the Senate, or the other way around.
Yeah.
It was 8, 8, and 7.
Yeah.
Which, if you look at the House and the Senate separately, is an even division. If you look at the legislature versus the administration, it was 15 to 8. So this is trying to view the legislature as a whole and balance it with the administrative members who are in statute here. It is, I'm sorry, Madam Speaker, Madam Chair, freewheeling a little bit, but getting rid of some of the science and data people is a little bit strange, given how much science and energy data is required to make good decisions in this world. But we're not talking policy, we're just understanding the statute.
Just understanding the statute.
All right, so on page 27, line 7, the council shall make recommendations to the Secretary of Natural Resources. In formulating the recommendations, the council shall identify, analyze, evaluate strategies and programs to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, achieve the state reduction requirements pursuant to 578, and build resilience to prepare the state's communities, infrastructure, and economy to adapt to the current and anticipated effects of climate change. And then it does strike some of the language that has been under that. So looking at impact of greenhouse gas emission programs, the technical feasibility and cost effectiveness of programs. That's page 27. Looking at the sources and which would have the largest reductions, looking at the financing options, and looking at new and existing strategies and programs to build resilience.
Ellen, a question about the bill. So this is removing from the Climate Council a number of areas of responsibility. Are they restored anywhere else?
Not specifically, because basically the work associated with that is being given to the secretary.
Okay.
And so
It's right here.
It's going to come in the plans. Okay.
yeah,
I think we haven't gotten there yet.
yeah. So then so on page 28, so this is the intro language on this was the council shall adopt the Vermont Climate Action Plan, the first of which was adopted on December 1, 2021. On or before December 15th, 2026, the Secretary of Natural Resources, in collaboration with the Department of Public Service and relative other agencies and departments of state governments, shall deliver a companion implementation strategy and aggressive yet achievable timeline for achieving net zero emissions across all sectors by 2035. The companion implementation strategy shall include long-term funding mechanisms that prioritize use of existing resources on or before July 1 every 5 years thereafter. The Secretary shall consider the recommendations of the Council and shall update the plan.
I have a question about this. I'm formulating my questions. So what I read here on page 28 is we're limiting the scope and work of the Climate Council by deleting a number of things that they currently do. We are adopt the Climate Action Plan. But what I can't tell is if that remains, does the Climate Action Plan stay as something that is then adopted and published every 4 years?
Yeah, so that's right at the last line.
Okay.
So every 5 years thereafter, the Secretary shall consider recommendations and shall update the plan.
So the secretary, okay.
Yeah, so it's asking
So the Climate Council advises on the.
Right. What is earlier on, I said it turned into advisory.
Right. No, I'm definitely understanding that.
Well, so the plan, it currently requires it to be updated every 4 years. And so we're expecting currently for this summer there to be an update to the existing climate action plan.
2025.
July
July 1.
1st, and they're working hard on it.
So it's on or before July 1st, every 5 years after the Secretary of Natural Resources shall consider the recommendations and update the plan. Okay, the recommendations are not the plan.
So every 5 years, the council makes
The recommendations are not the
And
plan.
the secretary.
That's right.
The
Yes,
plan is
but
moving
they-
to the secretary's office, probably the climate action office, I would imagine is where the new authors of the plan will live.
Okay, I've seen hands. Right, Mara was first, and then
What does the word companion mean in line 16 and 18?
So the Secretary is going to be publishing another document that is not the plan.
okay.
And I actually think they're currently working on this also. But it would be
Another document.
it's the implementation strategy. So I don't know exactly what that would look like. But I think because companion is something that goes with something, it would be separate.
What are the two documents? So now I'm confused.
The climate action plan
Okay,
and then a companion implementation strategy.
I'm pretty familiar with this.
Oh,
So, and I don't want to
you
speak.
tell me later.
Yeah, I don't want to speak for Secretary Moore, but, and we'll be hearing from her on this, I'm sure, when she comes in next week to talk about the climate action plan, because she's going to be coming with Jane. But, what, right now they're working on a kind of a resilience implementation plan. And the idea is that this July 1, the council and the ANR will produce their new updated climate action plan. That'll be published on July 2025. And then this companion document that's then intended to be delivered in December 2026 will be more, as I understand it, a more concrete implementation roadmap that, the climate action plan is a pretty big document with a lot of ideas and, suggestions in it, or, we can do this and this and this and that. I think this is intended to be more of this is exactly how we're going to get to where we're going. This is the work we're going to do. These are the timelines and milestones. Hopefully, this is how we're going to pay for it. So I think it's intended to be more concrete. As this bill contemplates it, it's, I think, really important to understand that it would be based on all of the assumptions or requests they're making in this bill, like it'll be net zero by 2035.
Right, yeah, okay, that's very helpful. Yeah.
Preparatory?
That was my question.
All right, page 29. The council shall finalize its recommendations on or before January 1 of the year that the plan is due. The plan shall recommend the specific affordable and practicable initiatives, programs, and strategies that the state.
Rep. Sabili?
On or before January 1, the year that's due. So if it's due in January 20, so it could be in, okay, sorry.
So, but again, we've separated them. So the council has until January 1 to make recommendations to the secretary, because she has to finalize the plan by July
Okay.
1.
Got it.
Yeah,
I
so
was-
it's giving
some notes.
her then 6 months to consider the recommendations. So set forth specific, affordable, and practical initiatives that the state will consider implementing to meet net zero emission reductions, achieve the state's 2035 reduction target pursuant to section 578, and build resilience to prepare the state's communities, infrastructure, and economy to adapt to the current and anticipated effects of climate change. I'm pretty sure that the net zero emission reduction is the same as the 2035 target, but I think that's one of the only times they use the word target, so not sure. I think those are the same thing. Probably.
So, so just to underscore for myself some of the new language that's seems to have a lot of import. So affordable and practicable, that's new. Affordable, not defined in statute, right? Affordable is not a legal term. Okay. From shall to will consider. Okay, and then again, from our current mandates to net zero goals. And then moving from 2030 to 2035, and then again, requirements to targets. So I just want to make sure I understand the new language in that paragraph. So I think I've got it. Okay.
So just following up on that, if I could, do you think that it's possible that there might be multiple definitions of affordable?
I don't think there's a definition in this statute. So yes.
Is there a definition anywhere about what affordable means in statute?
I don't know off the top of my head. I mean, I work on affordable housing all the time, which there are different thresholds, even within that type of work.
And then the other one that I had was on page 28, which is the aggressive yet achievable.
Yeah, I don't know what that means.
No. Have you seen that used before?
No.
Okay, all right, onward. We are on page 29.
Yep, so then all of so we're still in what the statute is.
Madam Chair.
Yeah.
So I just want to say, I think these are important questions because it's our job to understand, like the laws that we're passing and then if they're being implemented, and we have to be able to understand what the words mean. And so if we don't have good definitions, so I know we're bogging down, but here, thank you, Madam Chair, for letting us just kind of ask about these things. That's why it's really important.
Okay.
So then all of subdivision 3 is struck, and this is about some of what the climate council initially did about identifying ways to accurately measure things. And then on to page 30. So the climate council shall provide guidance to the secretary concerning the form, content, and subject matter of rules recommended for adoption pursuant to section 593. It then goes on to say the council shall create subcommittees listed in the subsection and may also create other subcommittees to advise the council and assist in preparing the plans, and it strikes out carry out other duties. And then they can appoint members to those committees. On page 30, so we're going to go through this. This is the Just Transition Subcommittee, but it's not being changed at all. It's just adding the reference to strategies to reduce net greenhouse gas emission. On to page 31, it strikes the reference to the council recommending necessary legislation to the General Assembly. Next, the council shall have the administrative and technical assistance, but not the legal assistance of the Agency of Natural Resources and Department of Public Service, and may request the assistance of any executive branch, agency, and department.
Do you any idea about the legal comply?
I assume because I would assume because they don't have any real authority anymore. They don't need lawyers.
Okay. And then the legal impact of the deletions on page 31 would be that the council can make recommendations to the secretary, but the council can no longer make recommendations to the legislature.
Yeah, and those recommendations to the legislature had come in the plan previously anyway. So because they're not going to be the ones updating the plan, that authority would rest with the secretary. On page 32, down in line 11, the members of the council appointed shall be appointed to serve a term of 3 years or until the member's earlier resignation or removal. So previously there was staggered terms of 2 years and 3 years. So now it's just making them all 3 years. An appointed member shall not serve more than 2 full consecutive terms instead of 3. At the bottom of page 32, there's an added reference to net zero greenhouse gas emission reductions. On page 33, section 15. Now this is updates to the climate action plan statute itself. So on December 1, 2021, the Climate Council adopted the climate action plan. The Secretary of Natural Resources shall update the plan on or before July 1 every 5 years thereafter. The plan shall recommend the specific, affordable, and practical initiatives, programs, and strategies, including regulatory and legislative changes necessary to achieve the state's net zero greenhouse gas emission reduction requirement across all sectors pursuant to section 578 of this title.
What's the significance of adding across all sectors?
I'm not sure. I mean, I think previously in other places in this plan, it mentioned all sectors, so maybe just for consistency, but you could maybe ask.
Would that be thermal as well as electric vehicle?
Yeah, I mean, those sectors, difficult. I mean, you can divide sectors in different ways in terms of generation, in terms of consumption, in terms of building types.
So the climate action plan is currently organized by sector, and there are recommendations by sector. Well, I won't enumerate them, but it's by sector currently. So maybe that's just for consistency. You know, on the top of page 34, the plan shall include those specific, affordable, and practicable initiatives, programs, and strategies that will oh, and then we jump. Sorry, and then we jump down. And then it is striking the analysis, development, and selection of specific initiatives contained in the plan shall be based on, and it strikes reference to the council's analysis and evaluation because they're no longer doing that work. And then it's also striking other reports, plans, and information. So that the plan will be based upon reports, plans, and information pertaining to greenhouse gas emissions and climate resilience strategies from the Agency of Natural Resource, the Department of Public Service, and other state agencies and departments, and where appropriate, the State Comprehensive Energy Plan Climate Action Commission report. So it is limiting what the plan shall be based upon.
Could you?
Sure. So subsection C is saying what the climate action plan would be based upon, and currently in the statute, it referenced the Climate Council's own analysis and evaluation. They will not be doing that work anymore, so they're getting rid of that. And then it's also getting rid of any other plans, reports, plans, and information, and leaving it to plans based on the state agency's work.
Council would look at what the state agency has done, make recommendations about the work that the state agency has done, which then the state agency will decide what they want to implement. Madam Chair, I have a question for you. I don't know if this is the right time or not.
Is it to do with the walkthrough or?
No, it's to do with Secretary Moore's testimony and requests I'd like to make before she comes based on the walkthrough, so I'll come back to you.
Sounds good.
Page 34, line 16. To the extent practicable and affordable, the plan and plan updates to the plan shall further the following objectives. So it's sort of just adding a caveat there of to the extent practicable. Affordable. Then on page 35, it's adding reference to net zero emissions. Line 5, the updated plans shall recommend rules for consideration by the secretary pursuant to section 593. The secretary shall proceed in adopting and implementing rules that, in the secretary's discretion, are cost-effective, practicable, and designed to achieve the net zero greenhouse gas emissions reduction requirements pursuant to 578.
So, may I ask a question on this? So adding that qualifier, I think, has a much better definition for affordable. I mean, it's basically what the secretary thinks,
Yeah.
which is different than the way that it's referenced.
Yeah. Yep. And so some of the language struck here, like it strikes reference to if the council fails to adopt the plan, but they already did adopt the plan. So that's one of the things that struck. And then section 16. This is the last, we're so close to the end. Section 16 is updating 10 VSA 593. This is the rulemaking provision of the Global Warming Solutions Act. So the Secretary of Natural Resources shall consider and adopt rules pursuant to 3 VSA Chapter 25. That's the rulemaking requirements.
What does that mean? Consider and, like, what is the change that happens there?
Curious about that as well.
Well, consider has been added a few times in this part of the bill. I don't know how much of a substantive change it is here, other than it really is, I think, emphasizing the Secretary's discretion. So the Secretary shall consider adopting rules which are consider and adopt rules which are in the Secretary's discretion, cost-effective, affordable, practicable, and designed to achieve the net zero greenhouse gas emission reduction requirements pursuant to 578 and are consistent with the climate action plan. In adopting rules pursuant to the section, the Secretary shall consider whether the rules are consistent with the specific initiative, programs, and strategies set forth in the plan and updates to the plan. Consider the Climate Council's guidance provided pursuant to subdivision 591B4 and further the objectives of 592.
I'm going to stop you there because this gets to what I thought was a slightly beefier authority of the Climate Council than perhaps it has, but the original language right here, how it reads, what the law says right now is that the Secretary shall ensure that the rules are consistent and follow the Climate Council's guidance. Doesn't say consider, it says follow. I'm just trying to figure out why, we'll learn more about it, but I'm wondering if that word is significant at all legally.
Well,
From follow to consider.
I mean, those are totally different words. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and I think we could talk about this at length. I think initially when this whole statute was drafted, there was an assumption that because the Secretary was given authority to adopt rules that were in the climate action plan, that the Secretary would adopt multiple rules that were recommended in the climate action plan, but that didn't really happen. They adopted one set of rules. And so to some extent, this is already happening. They're considering already which rules to adopt. They haven't been fully required. So I think there was initially a thought that there would be more stronger requirements from the Climate Council to the Secretary, but that hasn't really played out that way exactly. But yes, I do think this is watering down the requirement.
So again, the only rule that ANR has adopted pursuant to the climate action plan is the one around advanced clean cars 2 and advanced clean trucks. Is that correct?
Yes. And then in subdivision 2, the reference to net zero has been added again. On line 13, subdivision E, on or before July 1, 2027, the Secretary shall consider and adopt and implement rules which are in the Secretary's discretion, cost-effective, affordable, and practicable, and designed to achieve the 2035 net greenhouse gas emission reductions, net zero, requirements pursuant to 578, and are consistent with the specific initiatives, programs, and strategies set forth in the plan and updates to the plan to achieve the 2035 net zero greenhouse gas emission across all sectors.
So, I want to understand the new timing, the new timeline suggested here. Um, as the law currently lays out, the new climate action plan will be published this summer, in July 2025. And then the secretary has until July 2026 to adopt rules that will get us to our 2030 mandate. So the climate, and what this is contemplating is that the climate action plan still comes out as planned this summer. Then in December 2026, we see an implementation strategy, yes. Okay. Yep, in December 2026, we see an implementation strategy from the secretary. And then the following July 2027 is the rules adoption deadline to get not to 2030, but to 2035 net. That climate implementation plan is due December 2026.
Right, but I don't think okay. I was under the impression that this meant that the climate action plan would not, well, it will depend on when all the effects fall, but it seemed like it was not going to have the climate action plan issue their 2025 plan, but instead wait for the secretary because it was supposed to come out every 5 years. So then the secretary would do the next one. I guess that's a question for the secretary for implementation on here and the effective dates of all
The
this.
effective date is July 1st, 2025, and the plan had to be delivered before then. So it sounds as
Okay.
though the plan will be delivered by June 30th under current law.
Yeah,
And then this kicks in.
would kick in. Is requested to kick in. So because I don't think anything is changing about the climate action plan update that's coming on July 1 this summer.
Okay.
And then the next thing that we would, but I could be wrong,
There
but
wouldn't be another one until 2030 then.
right, so
Okay.
I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure, but we can ask, but I think that the suggested, requested, proposed new timeline I have in my mind is that this climate action plan comes out on July 1. It's well underway, right, Brandon?
Well
They're
underway. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're in, it's March, so yes.
maximum
They have in
output
fact,
load.
I think probably finished writing it and are now out, doing public comment, public outreach events, gathering input from the public about the plan to do a final revision in May, June, incorporating what they hear from the public and then published.
Mr. Coda, sorry, when I see shaking heads and nodding heads and for the record, did you have something to
Matt
add?
Coda, Fuel Sector Representative, Climate Council. We are close to putting out a draft. We have a outreach that happens in May in earnest, traveling to 8 different towns for evening in-person events. And then April is when we expect to have something more than just bullet points. Well, I got that, but you're correct. We're very close.
Okay. So,
So I defer to the current member rather
that's
than
fine.
the former member.
yeah, so the 2025 plan is on track. And then I think the next thing I see is the implementation plan that is proposed to be delivered in December 2026. That's intended to be sort of a more detailed roadmap to how the secretary proposes getting to 2035 net. So 2030 goes away and rulemaking pushes out to 2027 in this language.
Well, then that's interesting because this is amending a statute that will no longer correlate to the plan that's coming out in July.
I mean, the plan that's coming out in July is based on current law
Right.
and our current rules and our current requirements.
Well,
So on page 37,
And if I'm wrong about anything, we'll learn soon.
Well, and also I don't know.
Yeah,
So I'm
Well-
speculating based on the language that I read.
okay.
So it's striking the language that the secretary update the rules at least every 2 years between 2026 and 2030. So there would be a rulemaking in 2027, and then the next one would be July 1, 2040. The secretary shall consider and adopt and implement rules which are, in the secretary's discretion, cost-effective, affordable, practical, and designed to maintain the net zero or less greenhouse gas emissions, and are consistent with the specific initiatives, programs, and strategies set forth in the plan and updates to the plan, and achieve the net zero greenhouse gas emission reduction across all sectors. And then it strikes the reference to the secretary needing to update the rules every 2 years between 2040 and 2050. And then on page 38, the secretary established alternative reduction mechanisms that be used by sources of greenhouse gas emissions if necessary to achieve net zero emissions on or before 2035. It then strikes some of the qualifications that are currently in statute for the use of alternative reduction mechanisms. On page 39, it's then striking the authority of the General Assembly to repeal, revise, or modify any rule or amendment adopted under this section. You would still have that authority. You always have that authority.
Okay, so we were just putting that in for our own.
Oh, and so the reason you put it in though is the last sentence of the last part of that sentence is that if you do, that action shall not be abridged, enlarged, or modified by subsequent rules. So like currently in statute,
So we would get the last say currently.
yes,
And now
yeah,
we would not get the last say.
yeah. Although it would be an interesting
Mm-hmm.
legal case if an agency were to do that. I don't think it would go well for them, but this is making it very clear that if you all waited, that it couldn't be changed. And then finally, section 594 is repealed, and that's the citizen supervision.
So. Maybe nervous, huh?
Yeah.
So, I was really inspired by our colleagues' devotional today. And that we are all, trying to solve the same problem. And, I think several of us have noted the undefined word in here, which I think is a priority for everyone in this building, affordability. And so I would love it if we could ask the secretary to really come prepared with more thinking that, about what that means. So rather than us just asking her that when she gets here, really, what do you mean by that?
Happy to do that. However, the specific testimony request that I made of both Climate Office and the Department of Public Service next week
Is about the plans.
is that we are starting at a very high level, that we want to understand the energy plan, we want to understand the climate action plan, and that if they want to speak very specifically, in a limited way to how those plans would change under 289, we could save that for the end. But I'm really trying to start at a high level and make sure we level set on what these plans are, what's in them, what policy recommendations they contain, how they're updated, what they ask the state to do, how the state is doing on that. And then I told them both that as we continue in the coming weeks, there would be plenty of opportunities for them to testify much more specifically, and I'm sure much more than once on 289. So
When she's coming to testify about 289, I really would like her to
I think
prepare with.
I think that's important. I'm just trying to be methodical about,
I
we could-
appreciate that.
she could be here for 6 hours while we walk through this bill, and I really wanted to start with the plans.
Yep.
Rep. Southworth?
I make a suggestion, just that. It's obvious that there are a lot of questions around this. And I think it would help me if we took existing in this, each section side by side, talk about them, formulate questions, because we go all over the place with questions when we're going through a bill, and it just seems to really lag down. It just seems to really slow down. If we can have discussions prior on each specific section that we all come up with, we write them down, we have them ready, so that we know by comparing what the exact differences are from existing to current proposal. That we have that there, and maybe it would expedite our time with each of the people coming in. That's not.
That's the side by side. I mean, Ellen,
No. Sorry.
is it possible to request a side by side or?
No.
Because,
Because this bill, sorry, so a bill contains, there wouldn't be nothing for me to do a side by side of. Like,
right,
a
because,
bill is showing you what changes are being made to that statute. There's nothing else to compare it to.
This has all the old language and all the new language.
yeah, I mean, I went through, over town meeting break, and I did read this bill pretty carefully, and I compared it to existing statute. So, if we want to set aside time to have a committee conversation about that, so we can certainly talk about it and walk through, but that is a side by side is usually like if, I don't know, if there's a House version and a Senate version, and that the bills have changed so much that you can't even tell anymore, like what the House did versus what the Senate did. But
Yeah, and also like if you wanted to, after you have your high level plan discussion, if you wanted to have the administration, I assume it would be Secretary Moore, or maybe it wouldn't, like have them make their full pitch. I assume they have like either PowerPoint or some kind
They
of
will.
narrative on what the change is that they could like show you. I assume that, but I don't know if they already have it prepared, but that would be something because they are the proposers, and I didn't really generate this language that you could get more answers that way.
so, okay, hands all over the place. Who was first? Rep. Smith?
So it's the Global Warming Solutions Act and the Renewable Energy Standard
Yeah.
only that are being modified in here.
No, there's an efficiency stuff.
Yeah, there's some efficiency utility stuff in there too.
Okay. Just trying to get my head around the request in South version. What?
I do think the statement of purpose, I think I captured the very short version. Yeah.
The document I created was for my own personal use.
I didn't mean having much council. I meant as a committee that could do it together.
Mm.
Because I think we spend a lot of time just bouncing around, especially on the building sides. And to me, if we do it systematically and then we really discuss the areas and we fully understand them and then move on, I would find that a better process than jumping all around.
Rick Campbell?
Want to speak to that?
If I may, yeah, so part of the reason why that's happening is because some of us have been through this, right? So we're what seems like bouncing around is we're familiar with the process of getting to the GWSA and what the implications are of some of the changes that are proposed. So I guess I would suggest that if you really want to have a sense of
Oh, I will
what
take it
is
on
and what,
myself.
and what's changing is to go back to the act, forget the number, and GWSA as enacted and the res bill from last year. 179.
I was just looking for constructive conversation.
Yeah, no, but I think,
Our committee on each section and.
but I think that would give you the background, I think that's, if I understand you correctly, I think that's what you're asking for, but-
Yeah. I understood that you all have a lot more knowledge about this than I do. Understand that. I don't need that thrown at me.
No.
What I'm saying is, I think myself, I would like to have step-by-step constructive conversation on each change among us so that we can possibly come up with something that works.
So may I?
And
Sure. So in hearing that, what is coming to mind for me is I'm not sure how we would do that without looking at the whole Global Warming Solutions Act, which this is not modifying the whole thing, right? And it's extensive.
So just look at each section in here.
So
If I may, I think this is a big bill with a lot of stuff in it and very different stuff in different sections. And I think what I understand Representative Southworth's request to be, I totally agree with. Let's have committee discussion about the thermal section. And then let's have committee discussion about the next section. And we can all be writing down our questions and so forth. And, you know, in between each section, stand up for 2 minutes because it's a lot. It's 39 pages with a bunch of different stuff and sections. And I think we just need to for our own ability to feel confident that we are understanding what each section is about and really get our questions clear and discuss section by section would be helpful. Is that a fair summary?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I want to say that
Thank you.
I am really interested in that intent. I just think that we're not looking at the whole bill here. And, you know, having gone through the Global Warming Solutions Act, like just pulling out various pieces without thinking about the whole act together. That's what I'm saying.
But we are looking at the only parts that have recommended changes.
So,
Well, there's context.
There is,
Representative.
yes.
Maybe if we separate the bill I proposed, these 289, into the sections that the statute that it would be changing. So part of it is a big part of it is the Global Warming Solutions Act. Another part of it is the RES. Another part of it is the requirements of the DUs and the EEUs. If we could divide it up that way, would that be helpful?
Yeah, I mean, Representative Putner actually hit what I'm trying to get at.
so here's
Also, during your normal market process, this is going to happen naturally. You've only been working on shorter bills so far, and I do think the natural part of the process is after you get the initial part, to then slow down and go back. So I do think that is the committee intent after you get some high level stuff next week. Yes.
so why don't I
Yes.
step in here for a minute? So I actually have a plan. So one of the things that we were planning to do, and Ellen, I think, thank you for the walkthrough. We were planning to have a committee discussion. And so why don't we just move into that? Great. So Ellen, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time. So that is a big bill, obviously far and away the biggest bill that we've ever talked about. I think it's very important, as we already mentioned, the bill requests fairly significant changes to primarily to two existing laws, the Renewable Energy Standard and the Global Warming Solutions Act. There is another section about thermal efficiency, but basically we've got the RES and the GWSA. So in terms of how we approach a bill this big, we've taken plenty of grounding introductory testimony on the RES. We've walked through the GWSA and had some grounding introductory testimony on the Climate Action Plan and the Climate Action Office. So part of what I was trying to do at the beginning of the biennium was put some of those big building blocks in place and make sure that we've got stuff that we can all refer back to. Like we're starting to build our library, right? So we've done some very basic work on those two bills. The next step seemed to me to be, as I read the bill, and I've read it many times now, that we could start by taking the next step and having grounding testimony on the comprehensive energy plan and on the climate action plan. Then we start breaking it down into smaller nuggets. So I think if we did a section by section committee discussion right now, before we take some of that grounding testimony next week, I think we'd be possibly generating a lot of questions that I'm hoping we'll have answered next week by some of this kind of 101 testimony. And then after that, we can start breaking the bill down into blocks and figuring out who we need to hear from to better understand the sections, start getting people's opinions on some of the sections, and then as a committee, start having those conversations in sort of manageable bites when we've had enough testimony so that our conversations can be maybe a little bit more informed. So that was my plan for this bill. As we all know, the bill missed crossover. So it's not like we're rushing to get this out by today. So we have time, and I'd really like to approach it in a systematic way and make sure that we're trying to build toward, informed testimony that gets kind of deeper and more detailed as we get our arms around the bill, and then committee conversations. There'll probably come a point pretty soon where we've learned enough about, I don't know, pages 2 through 4, so that, Mike, we can do, we can say, okay, we've learned about sections 2 through 4. We've heard from the key people we need to hear from. What do we all think about pages 2 through 4? So that was my plan anyway. So I'm not trying to fly by the seat of my pants on this bill. This is a big bill. And I'm trying to make sure that we approach it in a thoughtful way. And also I'm trying to make sure that we build knowledge before we get into policy arguments. So that's how I'm thinking about approaching this. So I think Rep. Southworth, your suggestion is really well taken. And I think it's a great idea. And I think that we'll do that. I'm not convinced it's the first thing we should do. I'd like at least next week to start hearing from a few folks and get a little bit more grounding, but before we start really diving into committee conversations. Does that sound like a decent first step to everybody?
You're the chair.
Well, why don't we look at next week? Because I wanted to talk a little bit too about crossover and about next week and about some of the bills that we can expect to be coming over from the Senate. So Jack, can you put up our little not yet agenda? I'm going to talk. I have a full crossover conversation. So, because you'll see some of our crossover bills coming up on the little calendar block that Jack is.
Yes.
All right. So next week, we've got the week is filling up. One thing is that I want to explain that this was a very weird gappy week for us because I know I've mentioned this, but my priority was to make sure we got our 2 bills out into the floor. And I did not know how long that was going to take us. And I wanted to make sure we had time in case we needed it. So we did. We got our bills out. Yay. But it did account for some gaps in our schedule.
I just wanted to commend Representative Campbell.
Yeah. Scott, you did a great job. Yep. All right. So on Tuesday, we are going to take just some 101 testimony from the Public Safety Communications Task Force. They are working on that draft plan. We all got that in our inboxes. We're just going to hear a little bit about that and then move on. So just so it doesn't get kind of lost in the dust. And then we're going to take maybe a little bit of ongoing testimony about H11. We're going to hear from some national experts on that. And then at some point, we're going to do a walkthrough on S50, because to answer Rep. Morrow's question, at this point, we have one bill that's coming to us for sure from the Senate. It is S50. It's a net metering bill. And so we're going to do a walkthrough with Ledge Council, and we're going to hear from the bill's sponsors. Which I think we'll either hear from Senator Watson or Perchlik,
Yeah.
And they'll just come. Often when a bill comes over from the Senate, you have the original sponsor come over and just say, here's the bill, here's why I introduced it, like our little pitch sessions. So probably, for example, Rep. Sibilia will go over on H125, and Rep. Campbell will go over on our ADS bill when those bills get taken up and speak to those committees briefly. So S50 is coming over from the Senate. So we've got a live bill that we're going to want to work on. Then getting back to our conversation about H289, we're going to hear from TJ4 about the state comprehensive energy plan. Mostly he's going to talk to us high level, like about the plan, what it is, what's in it, how it's used, how and when it's updated. And then I asked him to save a little time at the end if he could talk specifically about how the plan intersects with H289. And then I told him that as we got deeper into 289, we'd have him back to provide DPSs. And I'm sure Commissioner Johnson will come as well to talk about their overall opinions on 289. But I'm saving that for round 2 with them. And similarly, we'll have Secretary Moore and Jane Lazurchak come in to talk about the climate action plan at a really high level. And they're going to provide, again, a little bit of sort of specific testimony on how the climate action plan at the end of their testimony kind of fits with 289. And then I told both of them that we'd be inviting them back as we get deeper into 289 to provide their thoughts on 289. I'm sure we'll be hearing a lot from Secretary Moore on that bill. But this is just a kind of an intro. Then H278 is the energy storage bill. We're going to do a walkthrough of that. We had a request from Vermont businesses for social responsibility to come in and talk about the perspective of their members that are, kind of business owners around the state about climate action. We have 2 climate counselors, 2 members of the climate council coming in to talk about their work. Again, higher level. We have a joint assembly. We are going to try to get Velco to come in and talk about H278 because it asks Velco to do work. And similarly, Green Mountain Power is asked to do work in H278. So we're trying to hear from Velco and utilities. Then again, more on S50. S50, because that'll be our live bill. And then probably on Friday afternoon, we'll do more bill introductions and try to stay current with those. So we've got a slew of bills that we haven't yet had a little pitch session on. So that's currently what we're looking at for next week. The big cliffhanger, and I don't know how closely folks are following what's going on in the Senate, but the big cliffhanger is that the Senate has been taking quite a bit of testimony on S65. And that started its life as a companion bill to H something.
16 or
No, it's the Efficiency of Vermont bill. So the bulk of
There it is, 196.
Yeah, H196. So the bulk of S65 is a bill that if it makes it over from crossover, sort of changes and expands the work of Efficiency Vermont. I think that's the best way to kind of boil that down. So most of S65 is that. And then in the Senate Natural Resources Committee, they added a clean heat repeal. It's a full repeal of the clean heat standard. It retains the fuel dealers registry and updates it or revises it, I think, according to the PUC recommendation. No? Or no?
That the Fuel Dealer Association. So what passed out of Senate Senate Natural Resources Committee was a full repeal of the clean heat standard and then a delay in the registry, a 2-year delay in the collection of data from fuel dealers.
Okay, so that changed since midnight last night.
That is correct. It did. It changed at
Okay.
11:05 a.m. this morning.
Okay, I looked at it last night.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is passed out of Senate Natural Resources is the Efficiency Vermont bill, clean heat repeal, and then no update, but a 2-year delay on the fuel dealers registry. So that's going to approps, or that's not clear.
I don't know.
Okay.
But I have been told that it may not go to approps.
And then that was the last thing I heard too, for probes or not. So anyway, TBD, much drama and last minute shifting of things. This is how crossover works. So we may or may not be getting that bill. And if we do, then that'll be, that'll be a live bill, right? That'll be a bill that may cross over on the Senate side. It comes to us, and that will become, probably a priority for the next to start taking testimony on that bill. We're going to need to take a lot of testimony on the Efficiency Vermont portion of the bill. We're going to need to hear from Efficiency Vermont. We're going to need to hear from the PUC. We're going to need to hear from the utilities. That's not like some light, easy bill that we can spend, an hour on. So I guess, heads up, that a gigantic hot potato may be coming to land in our little hot plate.
So in this bill we just did, S-289, there were some efficiency Vermont monies in this.
Yeah.
Does we have an opportunity, if something comes across, we might modify something that's going to affect here? And when something comes in crossover, it doesn't necessarily mean that this committee is going to finish with it before the end of the session. Correct?
True. But, true. Yeah. No, it doesn't mean that we're going to
Yeah, so there's
I mean, it doesn't even mean we're going to take it up, but I have every intention of taking up S-50 and S-65. I mean, the Senate has.
Do you have the opportunity not to?
Technically, yeah.
Yeah,
We're an independent body.
we can do whatever.
that
we
I
happens.
do.
mean, you can kill it, right? Something come across the
Yes.
Senate, you
We-
can kill it.
Our
Yeah, they
bills
kill our
get
bills
killed
all the time.
Yeah, it happened a lot last
They
session.
only kill
Look on the wall.
Mhm.
Yeah.
No, I didn't.
That's
How many
not-
are getting
No, but I know what
I didn't-
Rep Howland is
no, I
talking
didn't- I didn't-
specifically about
I didn't
crossover.
mean, I thought there was more, I thought it was sort of that this committee would have to have an up or down vote on any committee. So
No,
that it would be voted like defeating a
no. In
town-
fact,
a town.
the fate of our two little bills that we've now gently pushed out onto the lake like a little paper boat now rests entirely in the hands of the Senate. They
Would
don't
only
have
be-
to take up our bills.
Could only be a paper vote, not ocean line.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
So,
I guess you gotta think more ocean line.
yeah, but I mean, my hope, my intention is that we'll take up S-50 and S-65, take a lot of testimony, and then, but though we're under no obligation to vote on them or to pass them if, bills hit brick walls all the time for different reasons, but
We can do a straight goal amendment.
we could do a strike all amendment, cut it all out, and, the other thing too is that, not to cast aspersions, but the House tends to be a little stricter about germaneness than the Senate, is my opinion. So, I sat down for quite a long time with the clerk of the House yesterday and talked to her about what she would consider to be germane to S-50 and S-65. On the House side, we could definitely be challenged if we take S-65, which talks, S-50 is a good example. S-50 really talks about net metering in a pretty constrained way. We could be challenged on the floor and lose if we as a committee decide to take S-50 and add on to it.
Skateboard safety.
Well, that's a good example, right, okay.
Replace your ride or mileage smart or something. Like, we might get all excited about that and add it in there. And if it gets to the floor and somebody doesn't like that, and it's like, why the heck did the committee add transportation incentives to a bill about net metering, and they challenge that? Our clerk would almost certainly rule that's not germane, and whoop, there we go, that portion of the bill. Yeah, from Marvin.
How is the governor's veto of the BAA gonna affect our time, if at all, or is that just all approach to deal with?
I don't think that's gonna affect our time. Yeah. So, okay, those are the things I wanted to talk about. Next week, crossover, the bills we're expecting. Yeah, so we sent two, and as far as I know, we're getting two. I don't think we're getting anything from Senate institutions. They passed the big kids code bill, but that will come to us. That's a consumer protection bill that'll probably go to Commerce. So unless anybody else knows about anything coming from institutions, I don't think, yeah.
I have an update on corrections Wi-Fi thing.
Oh.
Inappropriate.
Great. It might be the appropriate time. This is this is a slow biennium. I mean, not maybe a slow biennium, just for contrast sakes for our new folks. This is slow.
Oh, believe me, I know that.
Yeah. This is slow.
There hasn't been the volume that there had been at crossover in previous sessions.
Yeah, the legislature and we have a whole area of jurisdiction that's totally brand new to almost everybody on the committee, the whole IT side. And with the ADS, with the agencies that aren't used to having, this kind of oversight and conversation. So that part of it is moving very slowly because it's so new to everybody. And then energy, I think, is moving slowly because, we've got a lot of political dynamics that are like it feels like they're putting things at a little bit of loggerheads. It's like,
So let's put them aside.
so, well, 289.
What, the loggerhead of the bills?
Yeah. So 289 is,
Got nomination.
yeah, 289, it's actually a great example of a big bill that came in 2 weeks before crossover, and there you go.
But it also has components of some of the other bills that are on the law.
Yeah.
And we never have a vote to say that we can amend 278 to include other of those.
Well, there's a couple different things we could do on,
Correct, the germane, those bills that are on the wall are germane, but they're gonna stay there as in committee, even if they get incorporated in
Yeah.
289.
yeah, 289 has,
Redundant by then.
289 has a lot of stuff that 289 casts a very broad net. And as we take testimony in the coming weeks on 289, we may not move 289 as the vehicle. We may do a committee bill. We may pull out pieces of 289 we like and put them into, I mean,
816.
oh my God.
I know.
Well,
Oh my
I
God.
just think from
Hey.
289.
They
Yeah,
gave
it's
me
the
an
only
opportunity. Don't say that.
I'm sorry, I opened the door. I opened the
816
door.
is coming over on S65, so like,
Right, so
That's right.
you've got your second bite at the apple, Rep Southworth.
I haven't had
H16
one
is
yet.
coming on over. So
If
Oh.
it makes,
if it makes it, yeah,
Second bite of the apple.
getting out of committee was, that was a big gate. I didn't know as of midnight last night if it was even gonna make it out of committee. So it made it out of committee. 4-1 vote.
65.
65 was 4-1.
Okay, so does that mean it's officially out of committee?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I thought I said that earlier.
Oh, okay.
But we don't know now whether it's going to,
pass the floor.
well,
It could die.
it has two more gates. We don't know yet whether it has to go to approps.
Right.
Sounds like that's up in the air, has that changed in the last 5 minutes, Mr. Cook? Okay. So there could be the approps gate or not, and then it has to come to the floor where all kinds of things could happen to it.
Right.
So I would say it is lurching its way toward us, emitting lightning
Sounds
bolts.
appropriate.
Yeah,
Did you mean it had to go through the floor of the Senate?
yeah.
Right.
Yes.
And maybe Senate appropriations first,
Oh, okay.
and they can change it.
And then when a bill comes from the Senate to the House, it gets read a first time in the House, just like any bill does and it gets assigned to a committee.
Yeah, it's coming here.
Well,
Yes.
it's an assumption.
Well,
Yes, you get to the appropriate. It comes. from
yes,
the
it gets its
committee
appropriate
to committee.
referral and
But-
here it will
but yes,
come.
but-
Mhm.
But if something that passes the floor of the House or that passes the floor of the Senate, it can't be reconsidered by that House again in this biennium. What's the
So I'm wondering,
biennium
wondering if we still
restriction?
need to be on live. Why not? Say again, Rep. Allen?
So if something hasn't passed out of the floor of the House, it can still be referred to in the committee, like that H2 that went out with some dates and so forth. That can't be, that those portions of legislation can't be modified again in this biennium.
And so H2 will go to the Senate now. And they will, so it's passed, it's an H bill.
You answered my question.
Yeah, so it started here, it'll go over to the Senate now, and they will rip it apart, shred it, revise it however they want to, pass it or not pass it.
Until it's moved out of the General Assembly. Once it's moved out of the General Assembly, then this has that prohibition from being
Right.
changed in that biennium.
You mean it goes to the,
Once it's gone through law or whatever.
Yep,
Yeah.
once the House and the Senate pass it, it goes off to the Gov. And if Gov signs it, it becomes law, and that's that.
Right, no, there was,
And you can't have multiple votes on the same question
Right,
in the same biennium or year. I think it's.
by,
I don't.
that was what that what I
that
was
was where you're
referring to,
going with
but,
that.
but when a question is passed the House.
Yeah.
And goes to the Senate and gets modified, it comes back to the House, but if it failed in the House, in the Senate, it couldn't be reconsidered the same question in the House, which is
Yeah.
the same thing.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
like,
but-
for
I'm
instance,
sorry, one sec, I am gonna interrupt. Rep Campbell has to leave. I think, we're not talking policy. I think, Jack, we can go off live. I don't have to be anywhere right now, so
We're gonna